what's up guys? Welcome back to our channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is our 2024 250 Motocross Shootout. We spent 2 days with these bikes, 1 day with the manufacturers and 1 day all on our own. We prepped all the bikes ourselves with some Maxima products, some SC1, and their full 3-in-1 chain degreaser and cleaner kit, which included their cleanup chain cleaner, their multi-purpose penetrant lube, and chain wax. Really stoked to have those guys on board this year. Be sure to tell them that Cycle News sent you. But yeah, always a blast riding the 250 motocross bikes. We're gonna break down each individual bike, some of the new specs, and then how it ranked in the overall rankings. The big question this year is, can an all-new Yamaha retain its position as the #1 250 motocross in our book, or will a new competitor come up and take its crown? Now, we always try to do a really good job about bringing a variety of test riders and riding a variety of tracks. So we had 2 different tracks this time: Fox Raceway, which is obviously a professional round on the Pro Motocross Championship, and also at Glen Helen. So 2 tracks that are notorious in the motocross scene. We also brought 6 different riders. We had myself, we had some local pros, we had some vet riders, some novice level riders, a really good mix to get a wide variety of opinions and just feedback overall on what bike handled best for a certain rider or what bike handled best for maybe a different type of riding ability. Now, like I said, the only modifications to these bikes that we made, they are straight off the showroom floor. We didn't do any tires, we didn't do any grips, anything like that. The only mods we did are graphics from Decal Works and a full degrease chain cleaner kit from Maxima. Anything that comes with the bike from the dealership showroom floor, that's the modifications we made. So first up is the 2024 KTM 250 SXF. This bike retails for $10,199 and has a wet weight of 237 pounds. So last year, the KTM had a full generational change. New frame, new engine, new swing arm, new bodywork, everything, you name it, it was changed. This year, there's only a few little differences from the year before, just some suspension settings and maybe some mapping updates. No real big changes here in the KTM world. Now, their Ready to Race mantra rings true in the open airbox and the full electronics suite, which features mapping switches, traction control, and quick shift capabilities. The KTM is no longer the lightest bike in the class, however. Its Brembo brake and clutch systems, WP exact suspension components, those are all considered premium features in this category. Its price tag at just over $10,000 falls somewhere between the Husqvarna and its GasGas relatives. Next up, the 2024 GasGas MC 250F. Now, this is one of 2 all-new models for this year, and despite it being all new, these are changes that Austrian customers saw a year ago on the new KTM and the new Husqvarna. The GasGas weighs in at 240 pounds and has a price tag of $9,399. So this year, the GasGas gets a new frame, engine, swing arm, and plastic that bring it up to par with its Austrian relatives. These updates also packed on a few extra pounds, tipping our scales at 240 pounds, which is 3 pounds heavier than the KTM. The GasGas suspension offers a more Euro spec this year, along with BrakeTech brakes and clutch systems. Since it lacks the mapping switch, the traction control, and silver wheels, and comes with other lesser parts per se, this bike is the least expensive of the 3 Austrian models. The 2024 Kawasaki KX250. The Kawasaki weighs in at 239 pounds and has a price tag of $87.99. You won't be missing the 2024 Kawasaki KX250 on track with its bright lime green coloring, which it gets more of in 2024. And that's about it in terms of changes. The Green Machine received heavy mid-generation revamp in 2023, which focused on low to mid-range power. This was achieved via a longer header, a straighter downdraft intake, and a repositioned dual fuel injector system. A hydraulic clutch and 3 different programmable couplers come standard with the Kawasaki. You'll also find an ErgoFit system, which allows riders to reposition their handlebars and foot pegs if desired. The 2024 Honda CRF 250R weighs in at 231 pounds and retails at a price of $82.99. Despite being unchanged again for 2024, is nearly the same as when this generation was introduced back in 2022. The Honda rides on Showa suspension and offers 3 different power modes with launch control. Pirelli Scorpion tires, a neutral rounded seat, and a cable-operated clutch highlight the Honda spec sheet. Despite being unchanged, the Honda is now the lightest bike on our scales at 231 pounds fully fueled. But the trick is, the Honda didn't get any lighter, just the other bikes got heavier. Next up, the 2024 Yamaha YZ250F. This bike weighs in at 236 pounds and has a price tag of $88.99, but at the one we tested, the Retro Edition, is $9,099. The YZ250F is arguably the most anticipated bike of this year. It enters an entire new generation and now shares the same chassis and slim bodywork as the YZ450F, with virtually the same proven 250F engine as the previous generation. The cam chain was beefed up for some added durability, and the airbox did need to be reworked to accommodate the new plastics. Yamaha's Power Tuner app has also been updated with easier to use functions. The YZ250F gained 1 pound from the 2023 model, but is still the second lightest of the group. In honor of the YZ's 50th anniversary, Yamaha also offers this new white retro edition, which is $200 more than the traditional all blue model. Next up, the 2024 Husqvarna FC250. This bike retails for $10,299 and has a wet weight of 237 pounds. Going for the most premium bike in the class is the 2024 Husqvarna FC250. It's the third and final Austrian bike in the lineup, and it's the most expensive, $100 more than the KTM. The extra money gets you Brembo brakes, Brembo clutch, WP suspension, and all the electronics you could want. Sounds pretty much like a KTM, right? Well, that's because the KTM and the Husqvarna are arguably the most similar that they've ever been. The main differences are the apparent plastics and graphics, a sealed off airbox, and a 10mm lower suspension on the Husqvarna. The airbox is supposed to create a mellower power character, and at the same time, the lowered suspension drops the Husqvarna seat height by about 0.8 inches compared to the KTM. There's one other bike in the lineup that we did not forget, and that's the 2024 Suzuki RM-Z250. Now the Suzuki weighs in at 233.7 pounds and has a price tag of $8,099. And even though the Suzuki is unchanged for 2024, we still brought it to our test. And one of the things that we think is pretty cool for this year is if you buy a Suzuki between now and the end of the year, you'll get a full Pro Circuit exhaust system, a full team graphics kit, and an updated map to match the exhaust system. So in our eyes, this bike is a stock RM-Z250. Even with these upgrades, this bike still feels like it did in the years past. The updated map and exhaust system certainly wake up the Suzuki at low RPMs and encourage the rider to use all of the bike's horses. Plus, how can you not love the sound of a carbon tip Pro Circuit pipe? The graphics also look sharp on the Suzuki bodywork. While the Suzuki is down on horsepower and up on weight, and it still comes with a Kickstarter, it's easy to criticize, especially if you haven't ridden one. Aside from the obvious, our testers had positive things to say about the Suzuki. Our expert riders praised it for its sharp handling and comfortable rider cockpit, and its manageable power character allowed them to ride the bike to its potential without any fear of it getting out from underneath them. With a few mods, the RM-Z can be totally competitive, and we thank whoever signed off on improving the RM Army editions. Still, it finds itself out of the official test and in the back of the pack. It is the least expensive of the group, which saves Suzuki diehards some serious cash for those much needed suspension modifications. With brands like Triumph and Ducati entering the 250 motocross scene, the more players the better. As long as Suzuki continues making a 250 motocross bike, you'll find it in our test. Alright, rounding out the pack this year is the 2024 Honda CRF 250R. It's unchanged again this year, and it seems like the Lawrence brothers are taking all of Honda's R&D money and funneling it straight into their pockets. The Honda engine is ultra friendly, and we think it's really great for novice level riders. It's smooth and offers a long linear power character that climbs to the top of the revs without any real punch. The CRF's chiller power band allows a fast rider to push the bike to the red line, but our testers deemed it necessary to carry more speed on the Honda than some of the other bikes. The mid to top is the sweet spot, but you can't pop out of a deep rut or an inside line like you can on the other bikes. All three maps are noticeably different on the Honda, but sometimes we felt like we needed to double check that we were indeed in the faster map option. First time 250 riders will favor this engine, but budget some bolt-ons if you're an intermediate or above racer. As far as the overall cockpit, the Honda almost always ranks first. The comfortable and neutral layout of this generation's riding position makes it an easy go-to for all of our riders. The rounded seat, adaptive bar position, and slim body styling are strong suits for the CRF. A smooth cable clutch and strong brakes mounted to Renthal fat bars earn the Honda some extra bonus points. The suspension and chassis department are also some of the CRF's weaker points. The bike is sharp and precise, but equally stiff and harsh. The fork is oversprung and doesn't gel well with the CRF's rigid frame. You feel every bump from the front tire up through the fork and into the rider's hands. When the track is fresh, the bike feels agile and is easy to pick lines, but this goes away as the track roughens up. The Honda demands to be ridden hard, but it's held back by its mellower power plant. This bike is a dream on a smooth track, but aren't they all? The slim profile and stiff nature make it easy to move the Honda where you want it. Switching lines on the fly or darting over to the inside just seems easy on the CRF. It still turns like a Honda, being stable and planted through rutted corners with little to no rider input. The bottom line, the Honda's just too stiff. In fifth place, the Kawasaki KX250. The fifth through third ranks in this video were really hard to pick. All of them ranked within just a point or two of each other. This year, the Kawasaki KX250 dropped off the podium from last year and crossed our shootout in fifth place. The Kawasaki feels like it could be the fastest bike of the bunch, but you can't win a shootout on just sheer power alone. It's putting the power to the ground that really pays dividends, and in the Kawasaki's case, the potent motor is its best feature. It blends a hardy bottom end into a usable mid to top with plenty of over rev. Gears carry to the furthest end of the revs, creating a broad feeling in any RPM without the need to short shift this bike. All of our riders opted for the more aggressive coupler, and they ranked the Kawasaki engine at the top or near the top of the charts regarding the overall engine package. It's also worth mentioning the Kawasaki is as loud or louder than the Yamaha. Just when you're riding it, you can hear it everywhere you go. Kawasaki's ergos are another plus. The traditional Japanese styling with that square edge seat and smooth lines feels right at home as soon as you jump on. The Ergo Fit system also emphasizes its appeal to a variety of riders like tall guys, shorter guys, and they offer an adjustable handlebar and peg position. Kawasaki again opted for the hydraulicness in clutch and brake components, which work well in the real-world riding conditions. Most of our riders seem split between favoring a cable clutch or hydraulic clutch, but no one nagged the Kawasaki for these components. The vulcanized grips and slim levers are still as much of a weak point on the Kawasaki as they were last year, but really the only downside to the Kawi's cockpit. It's interesting that 2 of the 3 Japanese bikes find themselves at the bottom of our list, and both of them for the same reason. Like the Honda, the Kawasaki is outright too stiff. The harsh feeling from the fork and rigid chassis make this bike hard to ride if the conditions aren't just right. The overly stiff fork puts force directly into the rider's hands as you bounce your way through the late day braking bumps. This made it hard to keep the bike straight and often stood the KX up in bumpy corners. The nervous front end is hard to get settled, and maneuvering the rigid chassis wears the rider out faster than it does on the other bikes. While the KX's engine alone could win our shootout, it's held back by an overly stiff chassis and harsh suspension setup. Our riders were simply expelling more energy on this bike than they were on the others, and they were also scared to trust the front end when the conditions weren't ideal. This bike ranked as high as 3rd for one of our testers, but he also mentioned that it was just too stiff. Just off the podium in our ranks is the 2024 GasGas MC 250F. Having 3 similar Austrian machines puts the GasGas in a bit of a no man's land. It's not quite the KTM, but it's also not a Husqvarna. The GasGas is all new for this year, but nothing groundbreaking in terms of tech or power. Instead, the GasGas is essentially 1 year behind the KTM and Husqvarna cousins. This means that the 24 GasGas gets all the same updates that the 23 KTM received, which means it has a stiffer new chassis and more consolidated engine design. These new changes were felt immediately as the GasGas put on what we're calling the Freshman 15 and lost its spot as the lightest bike in the class. What sets the GasGas apart from the other Austrian bikes is the updated WP Exact suspension. Technically, they're the same sticks you'll find on the KTM, but the GasGas offers a more Euro spec setting. This equates to a softer overall feel on the track, and we felt that the GasGas did a great job absorbing small bumps and felt easy to ride on a rough track. The softer spec doesn't mean it's very bouncy or too springy either. Instead, its supple feel is a stark reminder to just how accustomed to these ultra stiff bikes we've become accustomed to. Late in the day, the GasGas was favored over some of the other rides, including the other Austrian models. We felt this updated suspension spec worked notably well with the newly updated European chassis and was the go-to for our faster and slower riders late in the day. The air forks still allow the riders to fine-tune the spring per se, but we felt riders north of 200 pounds are likely to blow through and overuse the softer suspension functions. The engine package on the GasGas still generally feels like an Austrian bike, but a few things give it its own personality. The MC250F is less aggressive off the bottom, which complements the softer suspension feel for less experienced riders. This is also because the GasGas is stuck in the standard, more mellow Map 1. Without the aftermarket map switch, the GasGas lives in Map 1, which is noticeably smoother than the less aggressive Map 2 that you'll find on the KTM and the Husqvarna. In the stock GasGas map, faster riders will enjoy the mid to top range pull and push the bike into the red zone as they look for the limiter. The airbox also has a bit of a different shape, which further smooths out its engine character. With overall smoothness and comfort being on the menu for the GasGas, it's still hard to rank it over its Euro relatives. The lack of maps, a 3-pound weight difference, and the brake tech brakes and clutch just don't seem to work as well or feel as precise as the KTM or the Husqvarna. That's to be expected with the GasGas, since the GasGas is a more budget-friendly brand and more of the fun brand if you look at the 3 different Austrians. Its price point reflects its component levels, and if you can go without some of the more premium features, the GasGas might be the bike for you. In 3rd place, you'll find the 2024 Husqvarna FC250. The KTM and the Husqvarna are so closely related now that at times it can be hard to tell the difference without looking down at the front fender. The Husqvarna still retains its 10mm lower stance again in 2024. This puts the bike lower to the ground and in turn loses about a 1/4 inch of overall suspension travel. This year, the big difference though is the internal setting. Previously, the Husqvarna had essentially the same settings as the KTM, just 10mm shorter stanchions. This meant that no matter what, the fork and shock rode 10mm deeper into the stroke at all times. Now there's a specific setting for the Husqvarna which gives it a better holdup in all areas of the track. Our 2 tracks offered very contrasting conditions, allowing us to feel the good and the not so good from the Husqvarna. At Fox Raceway, the bike felt velcro to the ground and is hands down the winner of any flat corner. The lowered settings feel planted and stable as you navigate long ruts, and all of our riders gave the Husky a nod of approval for its stability in relatively smooth conditions. On the other hand, at Glen Helen, the conditions were a far cry from those at Fox Raceway. The deep braking bumps felt much harsher than we expected on the FC. This wasn't an issue that could just be solved by going faster either. The faster we went, the worse it seemed to get. Rough and deep conditions are where the shorter suspension seemed to do the bike more harm than it did good. Aside from the suspension, the engine was seen as a total asset. It's slightly different from the KTM with a sealed off airbox giving less air and a smoother overall character. We opted to run the vented side panel for maximum airflow, and the bike still felt a bit mellower than its orange cousin, even in the faster map 2. The initial roll-on is smooth, and the Husqvarna carries gears in a long and easy to ride manner. The full spread of electronics is nice to have too, with 2 of our riders opting to run the quick shifter for almost the entire time on both days. We're really splitting hairs here between the Husqvarna and the KTM, and even the GasGas to be honest. The Husqvarna nearly unanimously beat out the GasGas, but beating the KTM was a different story. The Husqvarna is $100 more than the KTM, and we're just trying to consider what we get for the extra bucks. Due to its shortened suspension, let's just say the Husqvarna finished about 10 millimeters short of second place. In second place is the KTM 250 SXF. The top 2 bikes are clear frontrunners in the group, but the KTM comes up just a few points shy of first place. This is the second year of this generation, and it's a good all-around package in terms of the Austrian bikes. It's not soft like the GasGas and not lowered like the Husqvarna. However, it retains the best qualities we like from the other 2 machines. The KTM offers full-length WP suspension and a more race-inspired setting, along with the complete electronics suite and a vented airbox for maximum throttle response. KTM's power is some of the most usable in the class and certainly lives up to its ready-to-race motto. It offers strong torque from the bottom and a usable spread of low to mid-range before ramping up into the meaty mid to top end. The new-gen engine keeps its high-revving Euro personality but doesn't feel as high-strung as it used to. You can push the bike into the red zone, but Map 2's aggressive setting provides a more meaty torque character that can be lugged or ridden down low. The KTM is the more versatile setup that all abilities will enjoy. The chassis is undoubtedly stiffer across the board than the previous steel frame KTMs. That being said, the KTM does feel like the best overall package compared to the other steel frame bikes. The WP Exact suspension components continue to improve year over year, and these air forks are up to par with almost any of the spring-loaded competitors. Riders felt they could attack the track at any time of day on the KTM, with it working well in almost any condition. Even with the new generation being heavier than before, the KTM still feels light and agile on track, and the extra weight almost helps the bike feel more planted to the ground. KTM's overall fit and finish help bring it into the bridesmaid position. Brembo brakes and clutch systems are some of the best in the business, and the ODI grips are universally comfortable. New foot pegs in a squared gripper seat shape complete the rider triangle, further aiding in overall comfort. Every rider liked the KTM riding position, especially since it doesn't feel as foreign as it did in the years past. Riders also felt they were getting all the bells and whistles with the KTM having the map switch, traction control, and quick shift as standard options. But if it's so good, why didn't it win? The KTM is clearly a front runner and is almost unanimously voted second place. It's the best bike in the European bunch and undoubtedly a bike you could buy on Friday and race on Saturday. When riding all these bikes back to back, our riders felt that the suspension and power just weren't as good as the first place Yamaha, marking the 4th year in a row that the KTM has finished second in our ranks. All these bikes feel like they're the best bike ever when you only own one, and that certainly rings true for the KTM. When this is our only bike in the garage, it feels amazing, but it's only when you put all these bikes head to head that you find that only one of them can reign supreme. In first place, call it a 5-peat, the 2024 Yamaha YZ250F. Now this was actually a surprise to us, and why do you think it's surprising? Because an all-new generation doesn't normally come in and continue a current win streak. Usually the first year bugs are apparent and drop the bike in the overall rankings, but not this time with the Yamaha. They kept everything we liked about the 23 model and ditched everything we didn't. Year after year, we've praised it for its potent engine and cloud-like suspension, but the wide radiator shrouds were a common complaint from the last generation. The YZF's new chassis is anything but that, as the razor-thin design encourages riders to use the entire length of the bike as they move all the way up to the front and use the back of the bike as well. Tight turns, no problem. Squeezing the bike with your knees, easy. This is virtually the same frame and plastic they use on the larger YZ450F, and the difference from the previous generation to the present one is immeasurable. This is what the 23 should have felt like. Power is another area where the YZ takes the cake. It's essentially the same engine as the years prior, but it didn't really need any changes anyways. At first, the factory updated mapping does have a slightly different feel as it revs a tick slower than it did before and requires a little bit more input from the clutch to get the bike to spool up. We quickly hit the Yamaha Power Tuner app and the techs uploaded their response map, which solved all of our complaints. This was the engine we remembered. Responsive torque off the bottom helps you pull out of the loamy insides without the dire need to short shift. The mid-range feels strong, and the YZ truly excels at the top and over-rev ranges. Riders noted they could simply hold it on the longest when riding the YZ without feeling out of control. It's the best all-around package that our fast guys and our vet riders voted #1. The KYB suspension further solidified the Yamaha's ranking. Small bump absorption is immaculate and a rough track just doesn't feel the same on a Yamaha. The valving counteracts the big hits and jumps or deep braking bumps as you move further into the stroke. Riding this bike late in the day made it feel like you were riding a totally different track when you were riding some of the other bikes. Suspension has been one of Yamaha's best qualities in the years past, and this year is no different. Now they offer new hand adjusters on the fork caps and makes trackside tuning a breeze. The new chassis is more nimble than before, but the suspension package is still well balanced to keep this bike straight no matter what conditions you throw at it. It's also hard not to consider the bonus of the Yamaha Power Tuner app when ranking the YZ. Changing maps, scheduling maintenance, and a no-lie hour meter are things we didn't know we could live without until we started riding with the Yamaha. The ease of use and overall technological advantage earned the bike some extra brownie points from our practically minded testers. Despite a unanimously #1 ranking, we did share some common complaints with the Yamaha. First of all, it's loud. From the moment it starts to the highest range of the RPM, the YZ clearly makes the most noise from the rest of the bikes. If you ride a Yamaha, you're already probably used to this, but if you're not, you're going to want to pick up a set of earplugs before you roll this thing out of the dealership. Second is the seat. The shape and density were noted as uncomfortable or too hard to ride on a rough track from some of our riders. The strong power, agile chassis, and class-leading suspension were just simply enough to make us overlook these flaws. Riding any of these new 250 motocross bikes is a dream come true. The new tech that these bikes pack make bikes from 10 years ago look ancient. These could be the best bikes ever if it was the only one you owned. It's only when we put them back to back to back do some of the blemishes become visible. Even with those complaints, a short list of mods like an exhaust system or a suspension revalve would honestly solve 99% of our complaints. This year, the Yamaha was the best machine straight out of the box, and despite being an all-new bike, its strong suits outgunned the competition for another year. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching 2024 250 Motocross Shootout. It's been a blast doing these tests. If you like what you're seeing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Check out the Cycle News magazine where you can find a full detailed breakdown of the 250 motocross test. You'll find photos, spec sheets, prices, and then you can sign your email up as well for the Cycle News magazine, which comes out 50 times a year for free, delivered straight to your inbox. Thanks guys for watching. We'll catch you next time at the track.